What makes a good horror story? Is it the dread as a heroine opens the door of an old haunted house? Is it the excitement of battling creatures that only come out in the dead of night? Or is it the darkness itself that lingers long after the story ends? Come with me. Let's cross that rickety bridge in the distance. Something might be waiting for us on the other side. Welcome to Shake, Rattle, and Record.
Made this song, composed this song in a plane going to Russia. For the president, Marice. I love you. I need you. I miss you. My love, I dearly love you. When you're away and unbearable loneliness overwhelms me because you are me.
Shake, Rattle, and Roll Tulay follows three girls living in the same hometown. Lilian, played by Ice Seguerra, Sunny, played by Ara Mina, and Marice, played by Matet de Leon. Their paths become intertwined when Lilian's brother, Nonoy, drowns in the river. The last person to see him was Sunny, and she becomes drawn to Lilian after the incident. They then befriend Marice, who lost her brother in similar circumstances several years earlier. In fact, many families lost young boys to the river. Grief and curiosity bring the three together as they try to solve the mystery of the bridge. On the night of Nonoy's death, Sunny drove past him on the bridge. Sunny is a bit of a reader. While she's driving, we see two things in the passenger's seat of her car: a paperback of Stephen King's Dead Zone, published in 1979, and a copy of Jamaica Kincaid's short story collection At the Bottom of the River, published in 1983. The Dead Zone is about Johnny Smith, who after a coma experiences clairvoyant visions when touching people and objects. Kincaid's stories, on the other hand, focus on the relationship between mothers and daughters. I'm not sure if it's a coincidence that we meet the mothers of all the three girls, but never their fathers. In fact, the mothers of Marice and Sunny push the plot forward. But maybe these books were chosen more for their titles and not their contents, so we won't think too hard about them. Now, the interesting thing is, that same night, Lilian walked over that bridge and met an angel-faced boy who tried to lure her into jumping off. She ignores his taunts and walks away, but not before seeing a farmer with his cows, surrounded by fog, observing her from a distance. Marice, played by Matet de Leon, pays a visit to the bridge to lay a string of sampaguita. The sampaguita is the national flower of the Philippines. It has been since Proclamation 652 in 1934, and it symbolizes love, dedication, and devotion. Sampaguita necklaces are commonly sold on the streets and outside churches. We soon find out, of course, that the sampaguita is for her brother who drowned several years earlier. Both Marice and her mother are being haunted by the ghost of her dead brother. He appears in her window after she sings an old lullaby he used to sing too. The apparition leads her to the bridge, where the ghostly figure jumps off. The next day, Sunny hears of a boy who drowned in the river. She goes to the wake and realizes it was the same boy she saw the night before. The three girls attend a Catholic Mass for Nonoy, where they decide that they need to get to the bottom of things. Why are so many kids drowning, including the brothers of Lilian and Marice? Lilian, who seems to be the most sensitive among the three, dreams of the bridge and the farmer again. At this point, we realize that the introduction was actually a dream. The farmer cryptically tells Lilian about Uro, his nephew, who is in the water. The boy appears to Lilian again, but he's not pretending to be nice anymore. He shows her his face at death, one side of his face bashed in, his eye bulging out of its socket. So we get a clue that although he's in the water, he didn't drown. If he simply drowned, then he would appear pale, with blue lips and limp hair. Think Tale of the Shiny Red Bicycle from Are You Afraid of the Dark? But Uro definitely died a violent, traumatic death here. Lilian wakes up in fear, as anybody would. As an aside, when I was younger, I looked a lot like Ice Seguerra, so people called me Isa in school all the time. Isa is his former name, for those who aren't familiar. It's not in official use anymore, but you'll still see older articles and, of course, movie credits with it. Anyway, Lilian, Marice, and Sunny meet up near the falls the next day, and Sunny gives them medallions of St. Christopher. She says he isn't really on the roster of saints, but her mother believes in him anyway. Now, this is true. Saint Christopher, the patron saint of travelers and children, is not officially recognized by the church. This is because he is widely believed to be a legendary figure and not a real person, so he has no date of beatification or canonization, but that hasn't stopped churches and monasteries from being named after him. St. Christopher is relevant here because of the famous story where a child approached him by the river and asked to be helped across. St. Christopher obliged. However, as he entered midstream, the river rose and the child's weight grew and became extremely heavy. It was only by great exertion that St. Christopher safely delivered the child to the other side. When St. Christopher asked the child why he was so heavy, the child explained that he was Christ, and when St. Christopher carried him, he also carried the weight of the whole world on his shoulders. The child then vanished. This was St. Christopher's turning point, after which he is said to have evangelized thousands of people. Marice and her mother appear to pray to him too. Back at the falls, the three girls swim in the pool at the bottom of the falls, but they do the thing where they go under all at once, and when they resurface, they're right below the bridge. Sunny's mom runs to the falls to rescue them because it turns out they were collectively hallucinating. They were still at the falls. Once they tell her what they saw, she tells them to go to Mang Cris, the espiritista who lives near the mouth of the river. Mang Cris, played by Dante Castro, is actually uncredited in this role for some reason, so it took some digging to find out who he is. He has one of those faces that you can't quite place, you just know you've seen him before. His IMDb page lists a ton of bit roles, so that's definitely why. The trio head over to Mang Cris, who promptly sits them in a circle around a chandelier and recites an incantation.
Paano po ba natin makakausap ang mga spiritu?
Maraming paraan. Sa tubig namatay ang mga bata. Tubig din ang kasangkapan. Kaya narito tayo. Pumikit kayo. Natam, ikum, huktum, his, uminuhum,
Now, I tried translating this, and it means absolutely nothing. But ritual accuracy isn't why I wanted to talk about Tulay. We're getting there. They hold a series of seances, which is just humming, really, but the children's spirits do show up and tell them that Uro isn't letting them go. Sunny begins asking the town elders, the chismosas, if you will, who tell her of the legend of the builders of the bridge who kidnapped and killed children to use their blood in ritual sacrifice. Now, this is a real ritual, not involving children, of course, but chickens or hogs. It's called padugo, bloodletting, and it's done until today. According to popular Filipino beliefs, spilling the blood of a sacrificial animal will help drive away evil spirits that live in the land where a home or structure is being built. Priests periodically release statements against this ritual. For example, Father Jose Francisco Sequia, chief exorcist of the Archdiocese of Manila, said, quote, Padugo is considered a form of consecration to spirits, giving them the right and authority over a place. But what spirits? Have a church blessing instead, unquote. He also said, in no uncertain terms, that all indigenous practices, such as using the anting-anting, calling on the spirits of the dead, and consulting espiritistas, opened the doors to demonic entities. If you're interested in exploring the tension between pre-colonial beliefs and the Catholicism imposed on indigenous populations during the colonial period, I suggest listening to episode 15 of the Her Story Southeast Asia podcast on the Babaylan. Anyway, The trio end up in a cemetery to look for the grave of Uro, and they do find a Moro Flores who died in 1921. Here, they are met by Uro himself in his terrifying form. Sunny accidentally leaves a copy of the book, The Celestine Prophecy, on the grave. It's just there for a few seconds, but it's important enough that the director left it in. The Celestine Prophecy is a 1993 novel by James Redfield that discusses various psychological and spiritual ideas rooted in multiple ancient Eastern traditions and New Age spirituality. So, because Sunny was carrying this around with her, we know that she's very interested in the occult, perhaps more than the other two. Armed with the full name of the ghost haunting the bridge, they return to Mancris, who assists them in a series of seances until Marice is possessed by her brother. Through this, they confirm that Uro was kidnapped by two men, a Filipino and an American, working together under the guise of taking him to Boston for a better life. They throw a sack over him while his hapless uncle sees the whole thing without being able to help. Uro's spirit witnessed his blood being mixed with the cement that was being used to build the bridge. His body was then thrown into the river, where it remained for over 70 years. If this sounds vaguely familiar to you, like it's an itch at the back of your head that you just noticed, that's because this urban legend about a bridge has been around for a while. In fact, it has been told many times in relation to the San Juanico Bridge, which connects the islands of Leyte and Samar in eastern Visayas. It was said to be the gift of the dictator, Ferdinand Marcos, to his wife, Imelda, who was born into the Romualdez political dynasty of Leyte.
The truth, they say, is out there. Trouble is, the truth sometimes can be bland and uninteresting. Subscribe to Dark Theory. Dark Theory is a self-produced Filipino podcast that takes you down a rabbit hole of mystery, conspiracy, and dark, twisted tales that blur the boundaries of what you know to be real. Subscribe to a little darkness. Listen to Dark Theory, available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Anchor. We make the truth a tad bit more delightful, all with a pinch of darkness. This is Dark Theory.
My darling, I love you beyond life, and my love will be yours forever.
Clarice Yvette Virgino of the Manila Times writes, when the bridge was constructed in the late 60s, a lot of children reportedly went missing in Samar and Leyte. The disappearances only stopped when the construction of the bridge was finished in 1973. According to tales, the blood of the children was mixed with the foundation to make the structure stronger. Parts of the children's bodies were said to have been added to the cement mix. This isn't the only construction/horror story related to Imelda, by the way. There's also the Manila Film Center, which is still said to be one of the most haunted sites in the country. Now, unlike the San Juanico Bridge, the trio, led by Mang Chris, do find evidence of the murdered child. There's a pretty cool scene of them holding on to their Sion circle while they sank into the water.
Doon tayo sa ilog. Mas malapit sa kanila doon. Dito tayo.
Dito?
Hindi ba gusto niyo silang makausap? Tinatawagan namin ang mga kaluluwa ng mga batang namatay sa lugar na ito.
Mang Chris then dives and retrieves the surprisingly intact body. The town, I presume, is told of the events, and they hold a funeral procession for Uro to finally lay his soul to rest. It is implied that the rest of the boys who were haunting the bridge were also finally released. Is Tulay a particularly well-told story? No, it has obvious plot holes and the exposition is forced in many parts. But, as children, we were terrified of this story. The thought of being kidnapped to be drained of blood for bridge construction It actually seemed possible enough. Tom Toss as Uro was frightening and I'm sure gave many people nightmares. And that's an important thing to remember about horror. Like we saw in the previous episode, it's a cautionary tale. In this case, kids are warned to stay away from strangers, to be vigilant. We don't live in the safest country in the world after all. And in Uro's story, there's a class element too. Poor people don't often get justice. Horror often represents an alternative explanation for things that we can't understand or resolve ourselves. One of those things is how hard it is to get attention or justice for missing people or missing children, especially if they're underprivileged. It could very well be that children did go missing in Samarinlete, but if they were from poor areas, they could have been written off or swept under the rug, like Uro in the story. And so, Tulay lets us imagine a world in which the dead are able to torment the living until they receive justice and closure themselves. Horror as a genre is really a way of processing real problems, a way of letting us talk about things we rather would not. And it entertains us because it allows us to safely explore these darker aspects of our reality with the knowledge that we will come out unharmed in the end. This is a theme we'll keep going back to in this podcast. Every fictional fear can be traced back to a real and persistent cultural issue. That's important because what scares us depends on where we live and how we live. We'll pick this back up in the next episode, where we'll meet one of the most popular figures in Philippine lore mythology as she appears in Shake, Rattle and Roll, Manananggal, released in 1984, directed by Peke Galiaga and starring Herbert Bautista and Irma Alegre. This is your host, the little doll in the pink dress you forgot about when you were 5. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow Shake, Rattle, and Record on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at SRR Podcast. I'm Agus Ramirez. Scare you next time.